So the DNC is in full swing and we still don't feel like talking about it. So,
Yeah, it's like the last thing I want to discuss.
oh, I know it's so depressing. But yesterday I was listening to Tommy Lauren's podcast. And at the end of the episode, she brought up something that's been on my mind basically ever since Kamala became the unelected Democrat candidate. So I want to play this clip of what she said at the end of her show.
Folks, I'm worried about the election. Actually, I'm very worried. Donald Trump is hemorrhaging female voters at a rate he cannot afford to. He doesn't need to win them all, but he needs to win more than he is now. And I'm not just referencing those polls when I say this. I'm talking to female voters who are undecided, female voters who don't live and breathe politics, female voters who are up for grabs. And the feedback I've been getting, well, it's troubling. They like Trump's policies, but they don't like JD Vance, and they don't like how JD Vance talks about women. They also don't love Donald Trump's personal attacks on Kamala Harris's intelligence. Now, don't shoot the messenger. I'm passing along what I'm hearing. The Trump campaign has a blind spot when it comes to female voters, and it needs work. He's fine with men, and his base is totally locked in and energized, and that is great, but that doesn't win an election. For these next 80 or so days, the Trump campaign needs to lock in on independent voters. He needs to win them over. He also needs to reach out to female voters, and he needs to do it sooner rather than later. And that's why, as much as it pains me to say it, it would be wise of his campaign to put Nikki Haley on the campaign trail as an advocate. Y'all know I don't necessarily like Nikki Haley. Her thirst for endless wars is super off-putting to me, and I am not her biggest fan. But I, in the scheme of this election, do not matter. I'm not a swing voter. I'm not an independent voter. I'm a Trump voter. But Nikki Haley appeals to the folks Trump needs to win over from Kamala, and I hate to say it. I really hate to say it, but it's the truth. You don't need to be talking about crowd sizes. You don't need to be going on rants about her not doing an interview. You don't need to talk about, things that don't matter. It's not about her. It's about the American people. Talk to them and let them know you need their vote. Don't assume people are going to bend a knee. That is not that 20%. Their ideas are still out. What they like about Kamala is that she's being hopeful. She's talking about freedom. She's talking about a way forward. They don't want a former president talking about the past. Trump knows how to win. He just needs to do it now. He has the ability to do it.
Governor, there's someone inside the Trump campaign, and maybe the former president himself, who's watching this interview saying, wow, she's really good. Why can't we use her in Suburban, wherever? If he called and said, could you go here to campaign for me? Would you do it? I mean, he's welcome to call. I have talked to him. He's welcome to do that. They are doing what they think is best, and that is his right to run the campaign he wants to run. He's chosen that. All I'm saying is I want to see them focus, and I want to see them win. We have too much at stake. Damn it. She's right. She's very right, and I hate to say it. But the Trump campaign needs to find a way to get her on the campaign trail because she is an asset at this point. I'm happy.
Okay. I have to say, I totally agree with her. And this is like the first thing I thought about when Trump chose JD Vance as his running mate. And I think we even talked about this on the podcast when we first found out about it. Like, as much as I believe that, the Trump Vance team would be the best thing for America, I completely agree that they're missing the mark when it comes to female voters, and they need some kind of strong female representation in their campaign to attract more women voters. Like, we already know a lot of women hate Trump because they believe he's a sexist. Like, if you look at his record, there's this laundry list of crude comments and, of course, the accusations of sexual misconduct. And after JD Vance made the childless cat ladies comment and then said women who don't want to have babies are sociopathic, I think that turned off a lot of female voters as well. So what do you think?
I agree with everything she said, except I don't think Nikki Haley is the answer. I think Tulsi Gabbard would do great. I mean, she was a Democrat. She's now an independent. She's a female. She's against war, which I think that is going to be a big selling point. Nikki Haley, everyone just looks at her as a warmonger now. Like, I don't think she's the right choice, but I do think, yeah, put a woman in there on the campaign trail. And as a woman, like we talked about this before, I was super disappointed when he picked JD Vance. And like he really had an opportunity to capture some female voters with Tulsi Gabbard as a VP pick, or really anyone other than JD Vance. I personally think he picked the least exciting candidate. And those comments that JD Vance made, that's the whole reason why like I've always hated the Republican Party. Like he's being the typical, conservative, like religious, like super right part of the Republican Party that I think a lot of Trump voters are not. And so if you're going to try to win over like undecided middle of the road voters, it's not going to work with that kind of rhetoric. But women are absolutely Trump's biggest obstacle. And I feel like they're not even trying with women, which I get it. Like they're focusing on their strength, their base. But Trump's base is rock solid. It is rock solid. He needs to start thinking outside of the box to appeal to the people outside of his base. His base is going to vote for him. He needs to start capturing these outliers that are there that really don't like Kamala, but are kind of put off with a lot of the shit that JD Vance is saying.
Yeah, and I actually have grown to really like JD Vance, and comments like that don't bother me. Like same with comments from Trump. Like I'm more about what your policies are and what you're going to do for the country than the shit that comes out of your mouth. But they are definitely not getting the female vote. And I was reading in Axios, there was they reported last week that this is the most gendered election America has ever seen, and that the gender divide has become even more of an issue since Biden dropped out of the race and Kamala took over. And the article was talking about how young men and women used to have similar voting habits in the past. But over the past 2 decades, women have been moving more towards the left and men are moving more towards the right. And clearly, the Democrats are using this to their advantage because they're appealing to females as being the party for women. And the author of the article was pointing out how this is taking place with each campaign's media strategies as well. And for example, like, Trump did the interview with Elon Musk, and he's been appearing on podcasts that are like more popular with males, while Kamala's campaign does shit like creating memes that appeal more to females. And it's like you pointed out in that fucking mind-blowing compilation clip you played last Friday with the female voters who couldn't name a single reason to vote for Kamala except that she's female and she has good vibes.
But does Kamala really have good vibes? Because according to Michelle Obama's speech at the DNC, which I said we weren't going to talk about the DNC, but I have to play this one clip because according to Michelle Obama, people have anxieties about Kamala being elected. So listen to this super short clip of part of her speech.
We cannot get a Goldilocks complex about whether everything is just right. We cannot indulge our anxieties about whether this country will elect someone like Kamala.
Okay, we can't indulge in our anxieties about whether we'll elect someone like Kamala. Like, Tara, does that not sound like the typical backhanded mean girl comment?
Oh,
Like,
totally.
I
Yeah.
mean, I'm like, she's supposed to be there supporting Kamala. And I feel like she basically just confirmed what we're always talking about, which is that Kamala is not popular. And this whole good vibes bullshit is completely manufactured. So I had to play that clip because, like, her and Obama pretty much spent the whole time talking about Trump and then made like one little comment about Kamala. So I think this whole good vibes thing is manufactured by the MSM. But to your point and what you're saying about this trend with women, there is this TikTok trend going around where women are asking other women to share their stories of how they lost their man to the red pill or the radical right. And people are sharing like their breakup stories and how they're breaking up with their boyfriends or divorcing their husbands over like them waking up to all the BS. Like it's just so crazy. But I think it speaks to this bigger cultural issue, which is that young women are being taught to hate men and hate masculinity. This has been happening for a while. What's so ironic, though, is that these are the same women that are out there protesting and pro-Hamas. Like they're supporting a group of people that are the biggest oppressors of women in the entire world. And so that's where I'm just really still curious because these people, these protesters, showed up in droves to protest the DNC. And during the women's caucus at the DNC, it was interrupted by protesters screaming, quote, "Stop killing women in Gaza," end quote. And they ended up being taken away by security. But the DNC, I think it's really highlighting how divided the left is becoming. Like everyone's saying they're eating themselves. And there was this reporter that was outside showing all the different protesters. Like there were tons of groups of them. And he said, what's interesting is that none of these people are protesting Trump or the right. They're protesting the DNC. The party is so divided. So I want to play a clip of one of those protesters who's a Muslim woman, and she was holding a sign saying, "Abandon Harris 24." So I want you to listen to what she has to say.
So you have a sign that says "Abandon Harris 24." Can you tell me why you're deciding to protest them with the sign?
Because Harris is not a different than Joe Biden. She just approved $20 billion to send weapons to Israeli army and instead investing this $20 billion in the American citizen. We say no to war. We say no to funding a military machine in other countries, whether in Palestine or Congo or any other countries. We want this money to be invested in the American people.
How do you respond to Democrats who say that Donald Trump would be even more pro-Israel? So by not supporting Harris, you're allowing Donald Trump to get reelected.
I think because they are afraid we are actually start shifting and making change, because when they moved Joe Biden, it's because of our movement they did it. From the beginning, they moved Joe Biden because of us. So today we're going to show also Harris that we're going to make that change. We're starting to shifting the control with the hand of the people, not the evil in the White House.
Are you, as a Muslim woman, concerned at all about a second Trump presidency?
I'm actually worried about the Palestinian mothers that they collecting the flesh of their babies in a bag. Is that going to be worse than that? Is that going to be worse than bombing the church and mosques and schools and journalists and hospitals and cancer patient hospitals? Is that going to be worse than that? We'll survive it here.
Is there anything Kamala Harris could do or say at this point to earn over your vote?
I think it's not just about Kamala Harris. She's just the face for it, but it's the whole system that built to serve the white supremacy in the White House, not the people, the American people.
Okay, so I don't know about you, Tara. That freaking shocked me because like while her views are different, she's kind of saying the same thing we talk about, which is that Kamala is basically just, a puppet being controlled by this establishment. And she's saying we're not afraid of Trump. Like things were fine when he was president. So yeah, she's not afraid of that. She's afraid of what's been happening under a Biden-Harris presidency over the last 4 years. That freaking shocked me. And she's basically saying like nothing's going to be worse with Trump than what's happening right now. This is a huge problem for Kamala because if these people don't show up to vote for her, she's screwed. And it sounds like some of them might actually show up for Trump, which I never thought I would say that before, but I was thinking they're just not going to vote, but they might actually vote for Trump since there were no wars under him in the Middle East breaking out. And they despise the establishment and they recognize that Kamala is part of that. So that was really surprising to me. I don't know if you thought the same thing.
Yeah, but I think it will depend on what the narrative is, right? Because what have we gotten from Kamala so far? Very minimal actual policy information, except for her ridiculous economic plan. But she hasn't said a whole lot about what's going on in Gaza and Israel, right? She said we're still supporting Israel, but she's not being very vocal one way or the other, except to stay middle of the road and try to appease both sides. So I think it's really going to depend on what she says in the next few weeks. But I have to bring up some polls. And you know how I feel about polls and my belief that they're not really a true reflection of what people will actually do come voting time. But I read an article in Politico on Monday, and it was talking about how Kamala is attracting a lot of the previously undecided female voters, like the ones who weren't supporting Biden, right? And there was a new CBS YouGov poll that shows Kamala is leading nationally by 12 points among women voters. And then the most recent Time Siena poll that was conducted last week in swing states, like in Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, and North Carolina, found that 55% of registered men support Trump compared to only 39% of women. And the numbers were almost exactly the same for voters polled in Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. And then Newsweek reported that the biggest demographic that both Kamala and Trump need to win over is this suburban women category. And according to political strategist Dave Townsend, Trump not only has a quote woman problem, but he also has a very serious one with well-educated suburban women. And it would behoove him and the Trump campaign to take a hard look at how this may be affecting him in these key swing states. And then New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu went on CNN's State of the Union on Sunday, and he talked about this too. And he was saying, you know, female voters are coming out stronger for Kamala than they were for Biden. And he urged Trump to focus more on talking about economic issues to gain support from suburban women and independent voters, and especially from the moms. And I think Trump is just out of touch with how to connect with this voter base. And on Tuesday, he was at a law enforcement event in Michigan, and he was addressing the topic of female voters. And he said, quote, "Why wouldn't they like me? I keep the suburbs safe. I stopped low-income towers from rising right alongside their houses. I keep the illegal aliens away from the suburbs. I think they like me a lot. Women want to be safe," end quote. So I agree, women do want to be safe, and suburban women want to be safe. But I also think it's suburban women who, by and large, are not experiencing the levels of crime and problems that women in urban areas experience. And let's be honest, a lot of the suburban, female population is the white, college-educated Karen females. And are they concerned about inflation and the price of groceries and the border and crime? Yeah, but they care more about shit like abortion rights and pro-women messages, because a lot of these suburban women just live in a bubble. And I was reading an article in the LA Times yesterday talking about a recent Kaiser Family Foundation reproductive rights poll. And they polled about 4,000 women, and the results indicated that 74% of women surveyed were opposed to leaving abortion up to the states. And that included 53% of Republicans. So while it makes no fucking sense to me that women would be placing this issue above real problems like the border and inflation and crime, this is apparently, women's rights is apparently the biggest issue for suburban females. And I just don't think Trump is doing enough to cater to this voter base.
No, I totally agree. And I think we talked about this before, but he's doing all these interviews, which he needs to keep doing, like with Elon Musk. And he was just on Theo Von, which was like freaking hilarious. Get on some female podcasts. Like, he needs to do that. We've been saying that for a long time. Start reaching out to females. Again, like, your base is going to vote for you. Like, you need to start thinking outside the box. I truly don't understand, though, how moms are voting Democrat. Like, with this part, the Democrat Party has gone after kids left and right, between the child trafficking due to the border, taking away parental rights with this whole gender mutilation surgeries and like the dangerous hormone blockers and all the things that they're doing, like in Tim Walz's state. So it absolutely boggles the mind as a mom how people are like voting for this. Not to mention the imminent threat of war. And like, that's where I kind of get why there's so many women that are just joining this pro-Palestinian crowd, just from that perspective. Like, they don't want war. But I don't know. Like, I think there's so many good points, like you just mentioned, that Trump could talk about. Talk about why it's good that women's reproductive rights are a state issue. It's actually closer to us now than it ever was at the federal level. Like, start driving that message home left and right. But I feel like he just says those things in passing, and it's not really like a main talking point. But back to the
I
polls.
I just want to say something. I think it's because he can't fathom just like I can't fathom how women would be more concerned about that than about the shit that's actually going on in this country.
Oh, I know. I know. I really think it's because we're not talking about women that are paying attention, that are getting into politics. You know what I mean? Like it's people that aren't looking at the policies and don't truly understand. And like you said, it's women that are in suburban areas that are not being affected. They don't have these Venezuelan gangs in their neighborhood. And so
Right.
they don't care. They're not even aware of it, you know? And I mean, the polls, basically anything the MSM is saying now, I really don't believe any of it. Like, remember the polls for Hillary in 2016? She was absolutely going to win. Women were all voting for her. 100%. Every single woman was voting for her. There was no way that Trump could win. It was not possible, but he did. And you have to think Hillary actually had a strong base of fans. She had like ride or die, like hardcore voters. Kamala doesn't have that. Like she's nowhere close to being as popular as Hillary was. So I say give it a couple of weeks. Once the excitement of the DNC fades and she does a debate or a press conference or an interview or basically anything that's not scripted, she's going to flop like she always does because she's just not a likable person and she can't think quickly on her toes. She can't perform without a script. So I say just give it a little bit of time. And speaking of polls, it's like I don't trust any of them, but I thought it was interesting. Elon Musk ran his own poll yesterday on X, posting, quote, since a lot of people had asked, here's a super unscientific poll. And then he asked who you're going to vote for. Well, Tara, so far, 4.2 million people participated in this poll, with 76% choosing Trump and 24% choosing Kamala. And I don't know about you, but I'll trust a poll of 4.2 million people any day over an MSM poll of like 1,000 people in blue cities. So I thought that was kind of a good sign.
Yeah, I really hope it is. But I do want to go back to something you were saying about Hillary, like and women actually liking Hillary. I just feel like we are in such a different place mentally as a nation now than we were in 2016. Like we did not have this extreme DEI agenda in 2016. We didn't have this, whole transgender movement with youth. Like did you see a bunch of gender confused youth in 2016? Because I didn't. And like they're fucking everywhere now. So I think there's just been a complete change in the population that when people are comparing polls to past polls or comparing what's happening, now to what's happened 8 years ago, I think we're just in such a different time.
Do you think though, like that since we're in this different time, do you think that's hurt the Democratic Party? Because I feel like it's kind of fractured it where they've gone so extreme that a lot of the people that were for Hillary or like moderate are like, what the hell? Like they're like us, like looking at this stuff, like what is going on?
Yeah, but I also think a lot of young people weren't voting back in 2016. And
Yeah,
like
true.
now
Good
we
point.
have young people who are way more involved in politics. And at the same time, we also have a completely different level of possibility of election fraud now than we did in 2016. I mean,
Yeah.
COVID changed the face of voting, and how many states do mail-in ballots now? And look at all the voter fraud that occurred in the last election. So
Yeah.
I think the combination of this, kind of unpredictable voter base and the unpredictable level of election fraud that we're likely going to see, like we can't really compare it to anything in the past. And one of the other things I keep reading about is how, women are connecting with the whole vibe thing, that we talked about with Kamala. And I'm seeing this switch, right? There's the dichotomy, like Trump is using more angry rhetoric. He's focusing um, on this like doom and gloom message almost, right? And this is being portrayed by the left as, fear mongering about the border and crime and the economy. And everything that he's saying is true, but it's more of a grim message of doom, kind of like how Biden's campaign was focused on Trump as the next Hitler. And in true Trump fashion, he's making a lot of personal attacks and jabs against Kamala, and so is JD Vance. And I think this approach is turning a lot of women off. Now, Kamala, on the other hand, she's taking like the fun, ditzy sorority schoolgirl approach and focusing on, her campaign of joy. Even last night at the DNC, her husband got up on stage and referred to her as the joyful warrior, right? And how, what she's done as a mom, she's going to do the same thing for the American people. And it's like, even though she's saying absolutely nothing of substance and, I find her cackle to be completely insincere, not to mention nauseating. But I can't tell you how many articles I've read where women are referring to her vibe as inspirational and happy. And that's contradicting Trump's vibe right now, from, lack of a better term.
Okay, so I wasn't going to bring this up, but I'm going to bring it up because it has to do with like this whole vibe of hers. And I didn't put it together until like there. So this is like a TikTok rumor. The only reason I'm bringing it up is because Megyn Kelly brought it up on her show that there's this rumor from people who have been leaking from her campaign that she's like a drunk and like they can't, like they're having a problem with this. So Megyn Kelly was talking about this on her show, and it's like, okay, this would make sense because either she's an idiot or she's just drunk. She's like that drunk friend at the party that like embarrasses herself and sounds like a fool, even though she's really a smart person. And when I heard that, I was like, oh my gosh, because Megyn Kelly started playing all those old clips that we've played before on the podcast. And I was like, oh, like that would actually make sense. So I'm going to play, this was a clip from just her last rally that Megyn Kelly played. So I just want to play it real quick so you can see for yourself whether or not you agree with this rumor going around.
Our election is about understanding the importance of this beautiful country of ours in terms of what we stand for around the globe as a democracy. As a democracy, we know there's a duality to the nature of democracy. On the one hand, incredible strength when it is intact, incredibly strong, and incredibly fragile.
Like it sounds like the drunk girl at the party. Democracy.
Did you hear Megyn Kelly's podcast today? Because
No.
I was gonna play the clip and I just didn't think about it before we started recording. But she played a clip of like literally what it's gotta be. Kamala has to be drunk. She has to be fucking drunk. It's a clip of like probably 7 or 8, different things that she said. And if you close your eyes and you listen to it, you're like, oh, she's fucking wasted.
Oh, yeah. No, I did hear that. And I was like, it makes sense now because we've played those clips before. And that's where it was like, she's such an idiot. Like, how could she be that dumb, but also like make it to be the vice president? Well, maybe because she's not dumb, she's drunk. Like, it was just this. I'm like, oh my God, that makes sense. But in terms of like this joyful vibe, from little clips and things that I've been seeing, the DNC did not feel like that. Like you had Biden once again yelling on stage. It seemed like everyone was just filled with hate from the people attending to the people on stage. There was one lady just spewing a bunch of hate about Trump. Like the whole thing was about Trump and hating on Trump. And she was doing like this weird thing with her tongue. And everyone's like, what the is she like high? Like, what is she doing? But you look at the RNC and the RNC, I felt like it was very positive and patriotic and like people coming together. So I don't know.
See, I agree with you there, but that's the thing. Like Trump's voter base, I think, is very positive and joyful, right? And Kamala's voter base is fucking angry. They are like these incredibly like angry and violent, like just icky people, right? But Kamala, who just laughs all the time and can't get through a single sentence without sounding drunk or making a joke or just, I mean, she acts like a fucking ditzy sorority girl. So, her platform seems joyful, but I definitely don't think that her, constituency voter base is joyful people whatsoever. Like, not at all.
Well, if I was drinking wine 24/7, I'd probably seem really joyful too.
I know.
Okay, there's something I'm so excited about this, and I don't want to get my hopes up too much, but there is one thing that I think could really tip the scales with women voters, and especially those people that are protesting the Democrat Party, and that would be RFK Jr. joining forces with Trump. So this could appeal to a lot of female voters because his running mate is a woman, Nicole Shanahan. And she's been going on a lot of podcasts lately and really talking about the common sense issues that I think would appeal to a lot of these undecided people. So I'm going to play a clip of what she has to say about what they're deciding on.
Tells me right now is that we just have to keep being honest. I got to just keep being honest. I got to keep focusing on what matters the most outside of party lines. I need to focus on a vision that goes beyond November. And if that means that we stay in and, there's benefits to staying in. If we get over 5% of the vote, we actually establish ourselves as the party. 71% of Americans want a strong third party with a real shot at winning. There's even public funds available if we get over 5% of the vote. So we could get, I think it's like $13.5 million in public funds to keep the party going. And that's, that's worth something. That means that we can position for a real third party election in 2028 where we don't have to go around and spend tens of millions of dollars on ballot access, which means that we can spend all of that time and money campaigning. So, there's two options that we're looking at. And one is staying in, forming that new party, but we run the risk of a Kamala Harris and Waltz presidency because we draw votes from Trump, or we draw somehow more votes from Trump, or we walk away right now and join forces with Donald Trump and we walk away from that and we explain to our base why we're making this decision. Not easy.
Clearly.
Yeah, not an easy decision.
Now,
Okay, so she's confirming that they are seriously considering dropping out and joining forces with Trump. This shocked me because I was under the impression that she was this radical leftist, and I think she was.
That's what I was just going to say because
Mhm.
while you were playing that clip, I was like, okay, I was thinking about how back when RFK first announced her as his running mate, we had a conversation about how radical she was. So I was very surprised to hear this, like that they would even consider joining Trump.
So she definitely was in 2020. A lot of people were, though. And like, look at how many people have shifted their viewpoint since then because they've seen this is what happens when you go radical in the country. I've been listening to her a lot lately. They've been doing phenomenal, going on a ton of podcasts. So I've gotten to hear like her viewpoint now, and it's not as radical as I thought. Um, and she truly is scared of what a Kamala presidency will do to this country. I really believe she has a good head on her shoulders and is kind of seeing like just how detrimental this is. And this is really like the first time that they've publicly stated that they're seriously considering dropping out and joining Trump, which is huge. And I know everyone thinks that Alex Jones is a fucking nutball, but like everything he says ends up being true. So he's saying on InfoWars that they had a source from Kennedy's campaign saying that he is going to officially announce this Friday, that he's joining forces with Trump. I hope that's right. Normally when Alex Jones says stuff, like everyone thinks he's crazy and then it ends up being right. So fingers crossed, because this would be, I think, just phenomenal. And I mean, when you think about it, like these are Democrats, like she's far left Democrat. He's been a Democrat his entire life, and they are warning Americans of how dangerous a Kamala presidency would be. Democrats that, were so left leaning, they are now talking about joining forces with Trump. That should be a fucking wake up call to everyone. And, I think if you combine Trump with RFK, they would be unstoppable. They would capture a lot of these moderates and independents. Don't you think?
Yeah, and what, like the DNC ends tomorrow, right? Ends on Thursday.
I think
So
so.
yeah, so I mean, this would be an interesting, little wrench thrown in the mix if he made this announcement on Friday.
Yeah. So, I mean, we'll see. I think it'd be great. I think a lot of people like him. A lot of libertarians like him, a lot of independents. So I am just like sitting on the edge of my seat. I feel like there's a reason that he leaked. Remember when I played that clip where he leaked the phone call
Yeah.
of Trump basically asking him to join forces? I think that was strategic. I think he did that to see what people's reaction would be. And when people were like, yes, please, like that would be amazing. I think he realized, okay, like I can either keep going, and they're going after him just like they're going after Trump. They're in
Right.
court left and right. They're spending millions of dollars to get on the ballots. And I think they're realizing like we're probably not going to win. So do we just lay over and die and let Kamala win, or do we actually try to fight for what's best for the country? So we'll keep hopefully we'll have some good news on Friday. Maybe we'll
Yes.
know for sure and keep everyone posted. So thank you for tuning in. And I hope we did a good job of not spending too much time focusing on the DNC because that's really depressing. So we'll be back here on Friday. Thanks.